All right, as mentioned, and hopefully I've got the right time now. Uh, I am going to go over a little bit of what I did for my copy of the Uber site. I wanted to show you this first. I mentioned this morning that there will be a Veterans Resource Fair on campus 2 weeks from Saturday from 9 till noon. 58 vendors, and I don't know anything more about it. But Carissa, who's going to run it, needs volunteers. So if you're interested, if you have the time, there's free breakfast and free lunch. If you're willing to do it, come in there for those 3 hours. Um, Her cards are up here. You can grab one of her cards, or you can just go upstairs during the break or whatever, and tell her that you'd be interested in helping out. That would be very nice of you. All right. If you remember last time, what I showed you was basically this. And I said there wasn't much of a site here, and I don't think anybody disagreed with that. But the big thing is, what I tried to do first, before I put in the content, was to come in here and try to set this up. All right? One thing you have to be able to do, this is my opinion, this isn't out of any book or anything like that, but if you're going to start creating a site, you have to kind of envision the end product. And that's why what a lot of people will do is they literally will pull out an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper and draw it up. You may have heard, and there are tools that you can buy for this, that are called wireframes, where you can wire the thing up for the way that you want it to look. An advantage of doing it where you just put it on a napkin, or on, that's where it kind of started, or on a piece of paper, is if it changes a lot, you're not really out anything. All right? So I tried to set it up and kind of think of the way that I wanted that to happen. But then after that, one of the things that had to happen next was I had to sit there and say, okay, with all that stuff I've got in there, it's not going to be opening like that, I guess. Then the next thing was, okay, everything that I've named, how do I have to come in and start putting in the CSS now? All right. I mean, some people will do the CSS first. The bad thing is, and I know people who work like this, and many who are very successful, that if they're given a project like this, one of the first things they want to do is they want to start thinking about all the colors they're going to use. And to me, there's, that has its place. I don't at all mean to downplay it, but that's not that important in the mainstream of things. Sometimes you'll go to work for a company where you won't have any choice over the color or the font or the whatever, because somebody will tell you what they want. But you should be more concerned with the content. All right? So when I came back in here, then I started to put in the content. And again, this is me speaking. I think, anybody can do this if you've never seen this site before. And there are all sorts of variations of this site. I think, lipsum.com, I think. You can go out there, and if I want 15 paragraphs, or 14 paragraphs, how's that? I can do that and have it generate that for me. And I can throw it into a website. When you're first setting a site up, there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. But to me, the site's going to start looking more complete, more real when you put actual content in it, stuff that matters. So that's what I did. So I went from here, basically, and you saw this if you were here this morning, that I went to this. Now, is this great? No. But it's okay. All right? I did come in and I literally just used one of those logo things to create something. As I mentioned this morning, I didn't do a real good job. I wanted the color that was on top there to match this color, and it didn't come up. Then I thought maybe that's better because it might have looked too bleached out otherwise. All right? And the stuff that's here, the telephone that you see here, the car, etc., those are all things from Font Awesome. All right? And there's all sorts of different things that you can use. You could make a case and say, well, that's really pretty big, and it is. All right, I could have cut it down if it was going to be for a mobile site. There's a lot of different things to think of. But that's basically what I had. And what I did was I went out and I went to a couple of those sites that I told you about last time. All right? And that's where I ended up grabbing the pictures from. And I resized them using GIMP. Now, one thing you may or may not realize, that when you resize stuff using GIMP, if I wanted these pictures, let's say I wanted them to be, let's just assume 1200 by 600, all right? And they're not that to begin with. So I type in 1200, okay? And and I put that in for the width, and I hit tab, or I click down to the height. It's already presetting the height for me. And I can go back and I can set it then to 600, but then when I move off, now it's going to reset the width. So there's no way to automatically make sure that you get things exactly the size that you want. All right. One thing that can help, in my opinion, is to start with images that are pretty much the same size to begin with, because then they're going to scale pretty much the same. All right. And that's one of the reasons I ended up using the ones that I have here. So again, these will automatically go, or I can click on here and I can go forwards, I can go backwards, etc. Okay. Then I put some text in here. All right. I had actually seen a site that was somewhat similar to this, and I didn't exactly model it after it, but I liked the way that it looked. All right. So I started putting stuff in here. Okay. And again, I did draw this up. And then after a while, it was like, you know what? Those pictures are actually pretty good the way that they are. So I left them like that. All right. This, I could have probably said BTC, but you may or may not have noticed one of the reasons I kind of did this one like this was these two pictures were the same size. This one I got off of Google Images. It's amazing that I couldn't go out to any of those sites and type in Black Hawk Technical College and find a match. All right. But when I went out to Google Images, I could. All right. And again, I wrote some stuff in here. I took this off of Uber's site. I took this off of Black Hawk's site. And I wrote this. All right. Now, if you notice, looking for a ride time, see our schedule, etc. In here, what would happen, and I don't have it set up right now, but when you click there, it's not taking you anyplace. But ideally, that would take you for what I asked you guys to create when I asked you to go and create that table. It would take you to that page. All right? And in much the same way, none of these go anywhere. All right? I did a bunch of work with colors and the like, and it may not look like it. You might look at it and say, I don't like the way that looks. Yeah, I played with it, but I didn't spend a long time. I tried to come up with a few things that I thought would be helpful. You'll notice when I put the pin in, I didn't exactly have it in the middle, but I can go in and out, etc. I guess if I really go in enough, it looks like it's in the middle. All right. The philosophy, what I did was I literally went out and typed in quotes on education, and I grabbed one. All right. The contact us, this is Black Hawk's main number, Black Hawk's main address, etc. You know as well as I do, that's made up. And I also set it up so there was a little reverse imaging. And I knew that Black Hawk had a Facebook page. I knew Black Hawk had a Twitter page. All right. I didn't know they have a Google Plus page, but they do. And of course, when I went out to YouTube, I had to go out to the best site that's out there. All right. And give myself a little bit of free advertising. So I did that. But like I said, I probably in total spent a couple hours on this. And that was in between drawing it up, putting in some, and I tweaked the CSS a lot. All right. Now, I don't know if that helps or not. Okay. But, I mean, that would be the kind of thing that I'd be looking for. And what I've decided is if I'm the one, and I think I am, that's going to be teaching the 157 class in fall, and maybe you heard me say this the other day, we're building a website from the first day. Literally, we're starting on day one. It's going to look a lot like this when we get done with it on day one. And I'm not saying it is or isn't going to look like this when we get done, but they're at least going to understand this stuff. Because I got a feeling that there are some people, maybe some in here, but I think some of the first year people who haven't built that knowledge base. That could be it could be you just didn't learn it on your own. It could be the person who taught it to you didn't do a good job. I don't know. But the point is, it doesn't really matter. But it's something that has to be fixed. All right. And you can raise your hand and go, no, it doesn't. I want to be a programmer. Okay, I only want to do Java. Okay, well, if that's the case, then maybe it doesn't have to be fixed. I don't know. All right, the other thing that I wanted to do with you then, first of all, as I mentioned, in the next few weeks, I wanted to go over a little bit of some of the stuff that's going to be in the classes that you're taking next semester. The Java class is simple because in the last week, like I said, we're going to build a non-GUI Java calculator, and it's not going to be a calculator that looks like a Windows calculator. It's going to be very, very simple. All right, but I want to do it both GUI and non-GUI so you can see the differences between the two. All right, so that's what we're going to do in there in the last week. What I'm going to do with that's one of the classes. There's 4 other classes. There's the ASP.NET class. There's the Advanced Website Design class, which is going to be a class in Bootstrap. There's the C language, C program. It's so-called secure coding, but it's secure coding in C. And there's relational database coding. All right, so with those 4 classes, and I just made the decision to do it in this order, I'm going to talk a little bit now about ASP.NET. A week from now, I'm going to do the same kind of thing, but I'm going to talk about PHP. All right. 2 weeks from now, I'll probably go over C. And the last week, and why am I waiting till last week? Because he still hasn't sent me the darn book. All right. So if that comes earlier, maybe I'll change around the order. Now, we talked a little bit about this morning. Some of you have heard this, but ASP.NET and PHP are both examples of server-side programs. Everything you've been basically doing this semester, forgetting about Java, Java's a programming language, but all the web stuff you've been doing, really the whole first year, is all client-side. And it changes over to server-side, all right, in the second year. And much of it is server-side. There's still programming. You still have advanced Java, all right, and you'll get into C, and again, you'll get into the Android, and you'll get into the iOS stuff, all right. But the web stuff, true web stuff that's done, is more server-side in the second year. And ASP.NET is an example of a server-side scripting language. Now, Microsoft's site for this, it's pretty easy to remember because their site on ASP.NET is literally ASP.NET. All right? And this is it. And you look at it and go, there's not really very much out there. There's a lot of stuff out here. They've got some free downloads. When you look through here, they've got a boatload of tutorials and other stuff that's in here. I probably mentioned this to you before, but on the off chance I didn't, if you've never done this, you owe it to yourself to go out to msdn.microsoft.com. That's the Microsoft Developer Network. Typically, if you can't find it, what you're looking for, anyplace else, this is a great place to start. You know, if you want API pages and a bunch of other stuff. What was that? Oh, that's Azure. That's a cloud-based system. All right. As you'd probably guess, W3 Schools has got a tutorial. And it's probably as good as just about any other one that you're going to find out there. I've gone through some of the stuff that's out here, not everything. All right. Now, the books that you're going to be using next semester, I already gave you that list of the books. But if you don't know this, all right, let's suppose that, okay, fine, I haven't bought any of the books yet. But if you go out, for example, to Muroc.com, which is Muroc's site, and I go down here and I choose web development books. Well, there's ASP.NET 4.5. That's the book. All right, and if I click on that and I go down to downloads, you can download chapters 1 and 2. You can also download all of the code that's in the book. Now, you don't even have to do that because, as always, you know, when I do this, and you've got this in more than one place, but there's already a folder out there for fall that's 152, 161 ASP. And if you look out there, here's a bunch of articles I found on ASP.NET. All right, that's where the homework will be in class. You know all this stuff. There's some PDFs I found on ASP.NET. There's the source code from the book. So it's already out there. all right? And for the class that you're in right now, the 167 class, if you go out there and you go out to the in class and you go out to today's date, which is 4/27, there's chapters 1 and 2. All right, so what the author does in chapter 1, and I'm going to go over chapter 1 and 2. We're going to re-go over them in fall, but at least so you can hear this stuff, so you can see what it looks like, etc. Like I said, it's the old type of try before you buy type of thing. All right? So I don't want to sit there. You know, he talks in here, and these are pretty good books, okay? But chapter 1, you know, he just talks, it's, as it says, it's an intro to ASP.NET programming. All right? This is the application they build throughout the book, just so you're aware of that. It's called the Halloween Superstore. Literally, from beginning to end, you have all that code now. That's all out there. All right? It's a multi-page website. All right, so as you probably guess, here's the home page. And notice it says Flying Bats. If you click the down arrow, you can choose, for example, Freddy Krueger, and that'll change to a Freddy Krueger mask. All right, type of thing. You can buy a one or more. You can add them to your cart. You can go to your cart, etc. So that's the kind of stuff that we do throughout that class. All right, but in here, then he gets in and he talks about this is a WAN, this is a LAN, this is a network. You can read that stuff. That's fine. All right. But what I do want to mention in here is I'm going to jump up just a little bit. If you look right here, this is pretty much the kind of stuff that we've been doing this semester. You know, you go out to Blackhawk's site, and basically, Blackhawk has more than one server, but the server is going, you make your request, it's going to be responded to by the web server, and that's about it. When you get into where you work with dynamic web pages, there's more to it than that. The good news is you as an end user don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about if you make a request for something and it's got to go from one server to another server to another server. You just have to care about, do you get back the information you want? All right. So what I'm just trying to show you is that's basically when they're starting to talk about the differences, and it's what you think it would be. All right. And what I mean by that is you are expecting dynamicity. If you go out to a website and every page on that website ends with .html, then there's at least a chance that you can go out there a year from now, and unless somebody's changed it, it might look exactly the same. But if you go out to a site and it ends with .php or .aspx or .jsp, it probably changes on a regular basis. I don't mean to say that a static site never changes. I don't mean to say that at all. But it usually doesn't change as often because it's more work. All right? Now, some of the stuff, just so you know, and this is the bad about what I'm going to tell you right now. Some of the stuff that's going to be in our book is old. Because right now, what we have on the system, all right, and you don't have to do this, but if you go out to your virtual desktop, we're running Visual Studio 2013. This book supposes you're using 2012. So some of the stuff they'll say in here says you can see these 5 ways. No, there aren't 5 ways. And it's going to probably be even worse because there's a good chance the 2015, which was out in beta mode, because I've already got it on the machine here, will probably be out in regular mode. And I always like it when you use the latest and greatest software. So you're probably going to have 2015. So there'll be times when there'll be an inconsistency between what's in the book and what you see on your screen. All right, just so you're aware of that. But they haven't upgraded their book, and believe me, I've tried a bunch of different books. I tried a different book last year. Some people liked it, some people hated it. 2 years ago, I used the same book you'll be using. All right, and again, some people liked it and some people hated it. There's never going to be a magic kind of book that you can buy that everybody's going to like. But it talks about these different technologies. Much of the stuff that we will do next semester, just so you see what this looks like, is you'll come in here, and if you look down at the bottom there, hopefully you can see this. That's the icon for Visual Studio right there. Now, I've got 2015. I want to show you 2013. So I'm going to go to Start, and I'll go up here. And you can notice the icon pretty much looks the same. All right, it's colored a little bit differently. The good news is we've got the ultimate, so we've got the good version with virtually everything on it. But I'm going to go through just a few of these things today, and believe me, much of the stuff that I go over, A, won't make sense, and B, you'll forget about by next semester. But at least you'll have seen it. That's the idea behind this, okay? Much of the stuff that's on here from this home page that you get, first of all, you can actually turn this off, so if you don't want that start page to come up, it won't come up. But there are stuff in here, as it says, you can start new projects, etc. from here. You can open up recent stuff. There are hyperlinks in here. Sometimes there's more stuff in here than what you see right now. All right. I don't particularly use this page, so I'm just shutting it. But what I want to show you is when I do a file and go to new, this is not what they show in your book. All right. If we chose project right now, and I'm not going to, but if you chose project, it would be very similar to the stuff you're doing in Denny's class right now, just so you know. Okay? And if you chose team project, it would be the same way, but it gives you the opportunity to go in and share files and parts of projects with other people. The file is literally if you're going to be creating other kinds of files, XML files and other things. What we're going to do most of the time is we're going to choose website. All right? And, hopefully I won't have to mention this. You've heard this hopefully from Danny and maybe from me in other classes. I don't know. But, you'll want to make sure, of course, that we're at Visual C#. Okay? So, and when you look at the stuff that's in here, okay, again, I'm mentioning this to you, and some of it may make absolutely no sense. It's okay. If I choose that option right there, which I'm not going to, but if I choose that option right there, it says, oh, well, it'll give you an empty website. Technically, you can't have an empty website. All right? Even if you try, even if I choose that one, I'm not going to. You get a file that's called web.config that's got the entire configuration set up for you. Now, that said, it'll be an almost empty file because it's an empty site. But it's sort of a misnomer to say empty website. This is the one that we're going to choose most of the time. ASP.NET Web Forms site. Okay? And again, you'll see that in just a minute. Some of this stuff, if we're doing more advanced stuff, more advanced model view controller and some other stuff, you can use these. All right? Dynamic data entities, it's a little bit more advanced database stuff. It's actually, some of it's way over my head. All right? WCF, all right, not WTF. WCF, which is Windows Communication Foundation. All right? That's if you want to create your own services. And typically what services are is you can create things, and you may or may not have heard about this before, but they're literally online is what's called an online yellow pages. So let's say that that Roger's very profound in some kind of different language, not English, but something else. He could write a service so that it would be very easy for you to go from one language to another so people from different languages could converse with one another. And then he could literally go out and sell it. And you can do that through making services. There's more to it than that, but I'm just giving you a little general overview. The ASP.NET Reports site, well, a lot of that stuff has to do with if you're working with Crystal Reports and the like, which you may or may not have ever heard of. All right? So the other thing I want to mention to you is if you look down here, I can move this up a little bit, but not too much. But if you look down here, all right, a couple things. First, it says web location, and it says file system, HTTP, and FTP. All right? For literally 100% of the semester, we'll keep it set to file system. All right? And what that is literally there is a very stripped down server that comes with this. So it allows you to use your machine as both a client and a server. All right? Now, I talked to John. He's done a little bit of investigatory work, and correct me, please, if I'm wrong, but I believe that Site 5 that we use is incompatible with ASP.NET because ASP.NET requires IIS, which is incompatible with Site 5. All right, so we're just going to keep it right here. The other stuff, though, is if we were going to actually go live, so if you were going to deploy this, you could use HTTP or you could use FTP if you were going to use the file transfer protocol to do something. All right. The other things that you're going to want to do, and I should have probably done a better job of looking this up, but when this first happens, and maybe you've run through this with Denny, I don't know, but you want to make sure, all right, that when you're on the virtual desktop, which is where you'll have to be when you run this stuff, you'll want to make sure that when you save stuff, it's to d:\users, your username, desktop. All right? Because if you don't do that, and you go, well, just wherever it goes somewhere on your D drive, but it goes way, many, 3 or 4 layers in and under Visual Studio, which is under My Documents and a bunch of other stuff. And it'll save some of your project stuff. And even if you go and you take your folder and you move it over to your H drive, that project stuff doesn't move over. So if you do that and you save it in the wrong spot, I won't be able to open your projects. If I can't open your projects, I can't grade your projects. Hopefully that just makes sense. All right. But you can browse over to here, okay? And it looks a little bit different too, because I'm going to actually bring up the first one here. And when you notice there's a bunch of folders. Well, I can go to here, and I can go to here, etc. But when you bring stuff up here, so if I were to create this website 1 right now, let's just say I just created it, and I wanted to bring it up now. So I did some work on it, I got out, and I wanted to bring it back up. I would want to bring up the file that said website 1. You don't want to drill down in here. So I just want to click here and click open. That's it. All right. And you're going to see it'll take a second or two, but there's going to be a few different things that are going to happen once we do this. All right. So I should be able to click OK, and it should hopefully start to load everything. There is already a website. Oh, no. It's because I screwed up. Let me try it again. I think because I did new. I didn't do open. So, all right. In many ways, this should look similar to the stuff you've seen in C#, and in many ways, it's going to look different. All right. So this is a very simple example, and you'll notice there's an images file here with a JPEG. It's going to look ugly if I bring it up on here. I think it'll come and show in the window here. All right. It's because it's not really that big, but that's just the size that it's showing it. All right. And again, I believe, please correct me if I'm wrong, but you're used to seeing something that looks like this. All right. And what we're going to have now is when we created that project, or when we looked at that project, I accidentally went through something too fast, but we'll go over all the options. And what you're going to want to say basically is you want 2 different files, one that holds your GUI and one that holds your code. All right. So notice you say, well, there's just one file there, default.aspx. No, there are 2 files there. That's called the code behind file. That's where you'll actually add your C# code. Will be into that file. This file right here, if I bring this up, this should look pretty familiar to you. All right. After what he said before, maybe Roger will hate this file because it basically looks like a typical HTML file. All right. And if you look at this, you're like, what, style 1, style? It'll build styles for you when you start putting things in there. All right. But we'll go back. There are a bunch of built-in CSS tools in here also to make your life a lot easier. You can actually go and you can write your own CSS file. You could sit there and get into Notepad++, write your own CSS file, load it onto here, and you can do that too. There's a lot of different ways that this can be done. All right. But you look up here, and again, this is like I said, I could go through this stuff. Some of it should make sense, the language you're using. This will always be set to true. Recognize it when we do things like button clicks, etc. All right. This will have the name of our code behind file, and this will have where it's inheriting from. What does that mean? Notice underscore default. If I double click on that, there it is. That's what it's showing you. All right. And there actually is some code in here right now. Not a lot, but we're going to look at both of these, okay, just so you can see what's in here. If you do this yourself and we created a brand new file, you'd have the doc type in here, you'd have the HTML, and you'd have a div down here. Beginning div and an ending div, that's about it. You don't have much more in there. So you can put anything you want in there. And when you look over on the left-hand side here, you might say, oh yeah, we're used to this. No, you're not. All right? Because if I close all these, there should be about, 8 designations, something like that. All right. These tools right here, to my knowledge, you've never used these. Okay, and you go, well, wait a minute, what's there? Yeah, sorry, Jeff, I've used a button. No, that's a server-side button. You've only used client-side buttons. All right? And if you say, well, are there client-side things? Yeah, they're under, HTML. Okay? Now, the funny thing is, if I come over here just to show you this, and I'm going to grab an HTML button, all right? And I'm just going to drag it in here, just so you can see it. Okay, there's an HTML button, and I'm going to put a couple BR tags in here just so you see those. Now I'm going to close that, and I'm going to bring up a button from here. All right, now I'm going to go and switch back so you can see what they look like. So I'm going back into design mode here. There's the buttons. They really and truly don't look very different. One might be, have a capital B and one doesn't, but they are very different from one another. All right. Notice right here, this is what's called design mode. If I click over here, that's source mode, okay? Maybe you're used to that. But what I want to show you is this. This was the server side. Anything that's a server side control must say run at equals server. That's the biggest difference between client side controls and server side controls in this language. It must say run at equal server. Also, if I came into here and I got rid of that line, okay, do I have an error? I'm asking you. All right, now I'm going to do this. All right, and of course it wouldn't show me an error. But technically, that's erroneous right now because when you're working with, server-side tools, must have a run at equal server and must have a unique ID. Must. All right. And other than that, a lot of the stuff that you do as far as building your interface and stuff literally is drag and drop. All right. My guess is, looking at this, and I'm going to remove these two buttons, so I just wanted to show that to you. I think you could all build that interface without really any problems. You'll notice that there is an image right there, and that's what we put in here. This is just an H1 tag that there's some CSS assigned to it, and that's why it's blue. Label, a bunch of labels, all right? A bunch of text boxes. Another label, nothing there, and a couple buttons, all right? You may or may not like this or care one way or the other, but let's see if I go over here. If I go over to table and I click insert table, I can go and create another table. So if I wanted to come down here, I don't know why I would, but if I wanted to come down here and click table, insert table, and I wanted there to be 5 rows and 4 columns as an example, I could play with colors and all sorts of stuff. I don't care. So I'm going to click. And you notice what it built for me. All right. Not only did it build that, if we go back into the source mode, you can see what else it built. All right. So it set all that stuff up for me. When you're creating controls like this, you can either drag out most of the controls, you can drag them out from the toolbar, all right, or you can literally type stuff in. And the bad thing is there's, for example, what I just showed you here, I don't want this table anymore, okay? So I want to go back to the table and go back right here where we've got the table right there, grab everything in there, boom, now it's gone. That's not a problem one way or the other. But you'll notice I can come back in here in design mode and click table again, and boom, I could put it back in if I wanted to. But if I go over to here into my source mode, you notice what's not here? The word table. So some of the stuff you have to be in a certain mode in order to be able to use it. All right, so you can be in design mode when you see your GUI, you can be in source mode when you see your code, or you can be in what's called split mode where you see them both. And if you like that, that's cool, then go ahead and do it. It drives me nuts to be into that mode. So I keep trying to be in this one where I'm, and do something I can only do in this one, etc. All right. But there's a lot of cool stuff in here, and what I want to show you is I want to run this for you and show you what's going to happen when we run it. All right. So I'm going to close the code. We want to just be in the design mode. So I'm going to run this. They do this in a lot of different Muroc books. All right. You may or may not be able to tell. This is bringing it up. All right. It's got a port number associated with it, and boom, I'm running that. It's an internet application. All right. And so I can say in here, well, what do I have? I've got $200 a month that I'd like to invest, and nobody gets 6%. So I'll get a 2% rate, and how many years? Let's say for 25 years. So if I invest $200 a month, get 2% interest, and do it for 25 years, at the end of that 25 years, that's how much money I should have. Make sense? All right, that's one of the first ones that we built. Okay, this one, you can't screw up because you have to choose something from there. But what if, for an interest rate, what if I didn't choose anything and I tried to run it? All right. This right here doesn't look like much. It's called a validator. And when we go over it, I'm going to show you that typically you'd want to put it over here, not down here, but you can put it in either one. All right. And it says interest rate is required. All right. I don't know if they've got anything, I don't remember on here. There's a range. Those are two different validators. One validator made sure there was something that was in there, and the other one made sure that it fell within a certain range. What's really nice is the program isn't blowing up when you leave something out. In fact, even if I came in there and did this, it doesn't blow up. You can still blow the program up, but not like this. All right. But just to show you, that's all I wanted to do was go over a little bit of the code that was in here, okay? So I've already shown you, I went over a lot of the information that was in Chapter 1 here. It may or may not look like it, but I did. All right. But they talk about in here internet versus intranet, etc., what the .NET framework is made from. You know what? I don't know if Denny went over stuff like this with you or not. If he talked about the CLR, the Common Language Runtime, he probably knows a lot more about that kind of stuff than I do. All right. A real important thing here is this word right there, this word. All right. You may or may not have heard this before from me or from someone else, but basically the web is stateless. So in other words, if I go out to the internet and I go out and bring up some web page and do something on it, and then come back a couple of minutes later and do something on it, all right, unless there are smarts built into that server, it doesn't know that it's me coming two different times. It looks at it as two different requests, all right? But if you want to do things like, for example, if you want to create that shopping cart that we looked at before, you have to save the state, all right? So we'll talk about state, and there are many different ways that you can save state, all right? One of them is to create what are called sessions. And you may have gone over this in the 157 class, I don't know. You may have talked about the differences between, like, for example, sessions and cookies, all right? Or you may not have, all right? But we'll talk about a lot of that kind of stuff. And again, you can see there's a lot of pictures in here. They explain the 5 different ways that you can set up state, and then they go through the application. All right, very similar to what I just showed you. All right, and what I like about these kinds of books is they always not only give you the code, but they also put the code in the book. All right, so you can see there's the HTML stuff, and there's the code for your .cs code. All right. Now, this is all I want to go over. I want to finish this and then That will be just about done. Again, that line of code in there may or may not make sense. All right? But that line of code, this if statement that's right here, this if statement, that, where are we? That's what's filling, once we run the program, that's what's filling this up. Did you notice it had 500, 100, or 50, 100, 150, 200, all the way to 500? That's what it had. That's what that code right there was doing, was it was filling that particular stuff up. So you look at that and you go, if not is postback. Well, look at it this way, that the first time I bring that program up, so if I'm bringing it up on a brand new screen, it's got to fill in all those values, 50, 100, 150, 200, all the way up to 500. But after I do that, after I've done it once, it doesn't have to fill them up again every time. In fact, I wouldn't want it to, because that would be a waste of time. All right. So what this is saying is, if not is postback, is if it's the first time, then bill that. So that's the only time that that's going to be true. All right. This should look really familiar to you from the stuff that you've done in C#. Now, again, the code might not be exactly the same kind of stuff you've done, but what's going on should make sense to all of you. Again, there's the code for the button that's called calculate. If is valid. Well, what the heck does that mean? What happens by default is when you come in here and you start going through all that stuff that you just saw a minute ago. I should have kept that thing running. I wish I would have. But everything that's in here, the system goes through and it checks and it sees, is there a valid value in there? Is there a valid value in there? Is there a valid value in there? So everything that there's an input for, the system goes in and checks and makes sure that there is a value in there and that it's valid. It doesn't check this one. You can't put a value in there. That value is what gets created based on what you put here, here, and here. When you click that, if everything was valid, it's going to put a value in there. All right? So when you look at that for what it just said there, if is valid, what it means is if it goes through and it checks all three of the input fields and they're all valid. Now, you could put $1 gazillion or whatever, which would be really stupid, or you can go in and you can put some of these different validators in, which we'll talk about. But if it all was valid, now you're coming in here and you're just basically, you're doing some conversions. So in other words, you want to grab whatever you chose in the drop-down list and convert it to an integer. You want to grab whatever was in the interest rate and convert it to a decimal. You want to grab whatever was in the years and convert it to an integer. Boom, that's it. All right. And then once you do that, it says you have to call this dot, hey, wow, that looks almost like Java. All right. This dot calculate future values. What is that doing? That's calling this routine right here that does the formula for doing a future value. So it's figuring out your future value, then it's just grabbing it and it's sticking it into that label for you. That should be very similar to stuff that you've done in C#. That might actually seem simple compared to some of the stuff you've done in C#. All right, again, here's the formula. And even with this, a clear routine, that should make sense to you. This, all three of these, you're taking all of the text boxes in that label, setting them all to the empty string. This, since you've got the drop-down that says 50, 100, 150, 200, etc., setting it to the selected index to 0 just means by default, when it starts, it'll be at 50. That's all. And that's that whole chapter. All right. So again, we'll go over it again. All right. But when you look on here, because I'm going to be done before 4, but here's the second chapter. So they're going to go through the same application, but they have you build it from scratch. All right. Part of the problem with books like this, and I've actually talked to the guy who runs this company, all right, is the fact that since they put all the code out there on their website and they make it available, what some people do is they copy the code in, then instead of trying to write their own stuff, they try to grab something that somebody else made that works and manipulate it enough so their stuff works. All right? And sometimes that's not a bad thing to do, but normally when you're learning something, it is. All right? It's like when people say, well, I just want to, I want to use your style when I code. It's like, why? Well, you know what you're doing. Well, maybe, maybe not, but the point is you should be establishing your own style right now. All right? So what do they talk about in here? They basically go in much more depth and breadth of coverage over all those things that when you start the new website, all the things that are in there. How to use Visual Studio. I already mentioned you can either drag controls out or you can put them in code. All right. They talk about the difference between design mode and code mode and the split mode, etc. How to add the validation controls. You saw those. Literally, you just drag them out. But there's more to it than that because by default, they're just a dumb tool. The control doesn't know what, it's a control, but that control doesn't know what control it's supposed to be connected to by default. So you have to let it know. You have to let it know if you want a special error message to come out, what that error message should be. All right? If it's got to be a certain kind of input, maybe it's a date. You've got to set the type on there to date. Not only that, there are several kinds of validators that you can put in. Again, just so you see this. And there's a whole chapter on this. It's a little bit later on in the book, but if we go over here to validation, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different kinds of validators, and then there's a summary. The compare validator is one you'd use, for example, you've all seen these before, where they tell you to type in a password, then they tell you to type it in again. You could use a compare for that. All right, there's other reasons you could use it too. Custom is if you got, maybe they have to enter an employee number and it has to be, you want to set up your own custom format for it. All right. The range validator, you already saw that. Must be between the range of 1 to 20. Regular expression, we've talked a little bit about that in some of the classes. You're going to become much more expert at using regular expressions next semester. And required, again, that should be pretty obvious. If I make this field, and this field required, if I leave any of them blank, that is valid check that I just showed you in the code will fail. All right. And the summary, what some people like to do is rather than have the error messages appear down here or whatever, you can have them appear either at the bottom or on the top. You can do a bunch of CSS with them, etc. So we'll take a look at that kind of stuff also. All right. And you kind of are in an advantageous spot. Wish I would have known what I clicked right there. But when they talk here about how to add code, you already know how to add code. All right. So a lot of the skills that you've already acquired this semester, you'll be able to use next semester. All right? And how to test, you already saw how to test it. You just go run it. Now, unfortunately, when you go run it, it's not always going to work. And sometimes you're going to get a goofy yellow screen with a bunch of weird messages. You may have already gotten that in the C# class. All right? But anybody who tells me, no, I've never had a problem when I've run any of my code, well, you're either incredibly lucky or you're lying. All right? This is a really easy language to make mistakes in, but it's a very powerful language too. All right. So that's about all I wanted to say. And then next week, we'll go back and we'll look at the future value thing again, but we'll look at it through PHP. All right.
What type of programs and things are we going to be writing in ASP?
You can look at the stuff that's at the end of the chapters. That's not what you're going to be assigned, but you'll be assigned something similar to that, from that nature. And are we going to create, this is, to me, the ASP.NET is probably the hardest class to teach. All right, because with some people, it just, for whatever reason, even if it's laid down there right in front of them, people just, I don't get this. But the good news is there's not only are there so many similarities between ASP.NET and PHP, but the way they've changed ASP.NET is when you bring up the ASP.NET homepage when you build a regular project, it brings a Bootstrap page up. So you can see the tie-in between that and a lot of the other classes. I've already started to write what I'd like to have us do for the PHP class. And if I get it done and it works, then I'm going to try to transport it over into ASP.NET. All right. And the idea then is we'd be building the same kind of thing in both. And I think that would help show you the differences and the similarities. Plus, if you understand the algorithm that goes, then you're just doing a lot of transference from one language to another. All right. So that's the best answer I can give you right now. Any other questions? Okay. Like I said, that's all I had then.